some issues to deal with what became the National Women's Party, started picketing in January of 1917. They started picketing the White House, and at first it was kind of mellow. You know, they would just stand silently by the White House gates, which you could do in those days. Can't do that anymore. And it was people. They were treated kind of with a lot of condescension. I think, you know, the press was kind of like, oh, these women, what are they up to? You know, they're bothering the president. They should go home. But then they started coming out with signs like this, and to compare the President of the United States to the German Kaiser was so amazingly treasonous that they would get attacked and beaten up and hauled off to jail. And so by the summer, you know, that's what they're doing. And there's this huge incident in June where a bunch of women in D.C. are hauled off to Auburn prison, which is this nasty, smelly, rat-infested prison, and they're housed with prostitutes and you know, it's awful. They're sentenced for, you know, 3 to 6 months, some of them, and they get let out early. And so this stuff all makes headlines around the country, including in Maine. So that's kind of the backdrop of the suffrage referendum campaign in Maine. And she was really the only person, even though she did have, there were other members of the board of the Congressional Union or National Women's Party in Maine. She was really their face and was the most prominent speaker on their behalf. You never see any, you almost never see any articles or any letters to the editor in the paper from anybody other than Florence around Congressional Union stuff. So she's trying to kind of lie low until September 10th around the Congressional Union, but she still insists on being the chair of the Congressional Union in Maine, and even though she received a lot of pressure from Carrie Chapman Catt and her fellow suffragists in Maine to take over NISA and run the suffrage referendum for them. So anyway, it failed in 1917, and this is just a headline from the Portland, one of the Portland papers, and Congressman Hersey says, you know, he praises the women who picket the White House because says they defeated suffrage in Maine. So who's the person who's most associated with that? Well, it's Florence. So, well, she and her husband take a little trip after that. They're gone. They go to New York because their son's gotten engaged to a wealthy heiress out there or something. So they take off for a while. But when they come back, she just says, you know what? The heck with these snotty, stuffy, you know, suffrage, NISA suffragists. I'm just going to work for the Congressional Union from now on. And that's what she does. So right away she gets, I think she got her friend Frederick Freeman to come up with her new letterhead. This says, a fair exchange is no robbery. So she's just basically saying, you know what, it's perfectly okay to exchange your political support for some cause that you want favored. By this time, she and her husband have moved to 108 Bond Street, in Portland's West End, built a much bigger house there, and that's the headquarters the main headquarters for the National Women's Party. So there's, you know, there's still, suffrage isn't going to get approved by Congress for another 18 months or so, and she's, the NISA suffragists are all just like knitting and sending money to orphans in France and stuff. And they've given up suffrage work almost completely because at the national level, the National American Women's Suffrage Association had decided that they sort of made this agreement with Congress and the President that if they stopped suffrage organizing, then at least on the federal stuff, and stopped bothering Congress for that, and worked, you know, kind of put their hands to war work, then they would have sort of proven themselves as deserving of the vote. And when the war was over, Congress would give them the vote. So they had sort of made this bargain, which Alice Paul never agreed to, never ever. She just said, let's keep going. And so Florence, it turned out that there were, you know, they gradually kind of picked away at Congress. They got enough votes in the House, and they were down to like 6 senators. They only needed 6 senators, then it just needed 4, and then just 2. And on the short list of the senators was one of the senators from Maine, because he had previously expressed a willingness to support suffrage, but then said he'd be bound by the results of the 1917 referendum, which of course ended in defeat. So at that point he said, I can't, you know, I've given my word, I can't vote for suffrage in this Congress anyway, maybe later. So he you know, they try really hard, and a lot of her work during 1918 and early 1919 is to try and to change his mind. There's just enormous pressure on, and a lot of focus on Maine to try and get him. He kind of weasels out of it. He never does vote for it until they get the last vote from the poor guy in Tennessee, you know, who finally votes for it and gets it through the Senate, so through both houses of Congress. And then this guy from Maine changes his vote, so he can be on record as having voted for it, although it was certainly in no way, you know, meaningful. So he was kind of a weasel. And so this is a congratulatory telegram from Florence that Florence sent to Alice after it gets through Congress, and she says, "Congratulations and rejoicing. The suffrage victory is due to you and your undaunted faith, splendid vision, and untiring devotion to the cause. I'm proud to be the lowliest of your disciples. Admiringly and affectionately, Florence Brooks Whitehouse." So she had a pretty good relationship with Alice, actually. I mean, her correspondence, Alice was always very reserved and formal when she writes, but Florence was always much more personal and stuff with her. So I'm not going to give you a blow-by-blow. We don't have time to talk about all the things that Florence did to make sure that Maine ratified the federal amendment when it came time. They were the 19th state, and there was a lot of drama at the end. I'll just say that it was Florence and Alice Paul in the room, making sure that, you know, that correcting the problem that came up because of some weaselly men who backed out at the last minute. And it was Florence and Alice Paul who strong-armed him into making it right. So here's Florence standing behind the Governor Milliken as he's signing. And next to her is her buddy Grace Hill, who was married to a judge. And in our family, we have a family camp on Panther Pond, and the Hills had a camp also right around the cove from us. That family still owns it. And let's see, I never remember exactly who these are. Yeah, Mabel Connor is the person in the middle here, and she's the new president of NISA. To her right is Catherine Reed Valentine, and her father was Thomas Reed, who was Speaker of the House, U.S. House, and was known as Czar Reed because he jammed through a bunch of procedural stuff to keep Congress on track and focus on its work. And you can see she was kind of a nasty person. I think she had some of her dad's tendencies. And then Gertrude Pattendall and Anne Gannett are the other two. And so one thing that's fun about this photo is that you can see here, this is it's dyed 3 colors, well, it's 2 colors at least, you can see, but direction 3, the colors of the Congressional Union of the National Women's Party were purple, white, and gold. And they created this pen, this quill, to send around to all the states to so they can use in the signing ceremony. And the fact that the governor is using this in the signing ceremony, he was supportive of suffrage, and he knew exactly what he was doing. And I think, you know, he knew that it was a nod or a tip of the hat in a way to the National Women's Party for being the group that really pushed suffrage through Maine in the end. And at the end of the ceremony, he gave each of the women there sort of a souvenir pen that was made of steel, but he gave to Florence a pearl-handled gold pen. You know, which I sort of think of like a pearl-handled revolver. I looked for it, I couldn't find it. So I think that was a bit of a nod to her outlaw ways, perhaps. So if you don't know the wording of the 19th Amendment, it's the right of the citizens shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any states on account of sex. And actually, this was very similar to the language that Alice Paul ended up using for the Equal Rights Amendment. And just to connect a few more dots to the present, the National American Woman Suffrage Association, as soon as the 36th state ratified, became the League of Women Voters, and the Maine Woman Suffrage Association became its affiliate, the Maine League of Women Voters. And the National Women's Party ends up sponsoring the Equal Rights Amendment. It takes them a few years to get going on it. And the main branch of the National Women's Party just remains that because they don't have to change their name. So Florence Suffrage was one. She was invited to serve on various boards. She took up painting later in life. Robert, who had, I really neglected Robert, but he was also very supportive of suffrage. He founded and chaired something called the Men's Equal Suffrage League, and did a lot of work. He supported her, like 95% of the thing that he didn't want to see her do was to go to DC and get arrested and jailed and went for picketing. So because he put like $1,000 of their money into the 1917 referendum campaign in Maine, and a lot of other money besides that. But that was like over $20,000 in today's money. So you know, he did put his money where his mouth is, but he just didn't want to see his wife in prison. So I think she pretty much went along with that. I think that there was one time, maybe in 1918, that she went down. And actually, I should read you this because I think it really gives you a sense of how angry she's gotten. And so there's this one week in 1918, it's right after her first son has gone off to war, and she, in 1 week, she gets a letter about a week-long food drive for war relief, and also a letter from the NWP saying that 4 women had been arrested and sentenced to 6 months in Auburn prison. And she says, this is a letter to the editor that she wrote at that time. In my heart there is a deep resentment against my country, that at this time when it is demanding the greatest sacrifices from me and from hundreds of thousands of mothers the country over, that democratic principles be advanced in Europe, it refuses to recognize women in that democracy at home. A resentment that in all President Wilson's splendid oratory upon human liberty, there is no inclusion of women as human beings. That women who are responding with sons, money, and service to the government can be mobbed without protest, arrested, and sentenced and placed in prison by the government which is taking their sons and their money and their service to wage its wars. And she goes on to say, the treatment of the Washington pickets will forever be a blot upon the United States government. Whether or not we believe their action is wise, there is no question that they are within the law under the First Amendment of the Constitution. So she was the only person in Maine who was writing anything to the papers about this in support of the picket. And she was on the right side of things. And so anyway, Robert died in 1924, and she was just completely devastated by that, and it took her a bit to recover. She went on to do a bunch of paintings, and she got very involved in peace activism. She joined, among other things, the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom, and she was active in church, various churches in Maine that were active in the peace movement, and she did a weekly radio show for WGAN. She was buddies with the Gannets, and she did a weekly radio show on peace topics. I don't know what her painting. She liked to paint at Mohegan. And she tried to write a third novel, which I found this year. I had never seen before. It wasn't that good. It didn't get published. But